The desert heat shimmered in waves across the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base, distorting the air above the concrete runway where Colonel William Hayes stood watching the impossible unfold. 27 years of flying combat missions had taught him to recognize when a pilot was pushing beyond normal limits, and what he was witnessing now defied every safety protocol in the book. The F-35 Lightning II streaked across the Nevada sky, pulling maneuvers that would make most pilots black out within seconds. Hayes shielded his eyes against the brutal afternoon glare, tracking the lone aircraft as it carved through the air with a precision that bordered on reckless. Beside him, the flight engineer gripped his tablet so tightly his knuckles had gone white. 9 Gs for 17 seconds, the engineer muttered, eyes fixed on the data streaming across his screen. No blackout, third time today. Hayes nodded silently, his weathered face betraying nothing despite the grudging fascination he felt. The multi-million-dollar aircraft banked sharply, then executed a vertical climb that seemed to defy physics. As the jet reached apex, it performed a maneuver that made Hayes's breath catch. The Cobra. The aircraft pitched up nearly 90 degrees while maintaining forward momentum, then recovered with fluid grace. "That move got me shot down over Baghdad in '91, Hayes said quietly. "Only ever saw one pilot pull it off successfully in combat." "Storm Thornton," the engineer replied, "her father." The F-35 touched down with perfect precision. As the canopy lifted, Captain Sarah Phoenix Thornton removed her helmet, releasing auburn hair that framed features both delicate and determined. At 31, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime proving herself in spaces designed to exclude her. Hayes watched her climb down, noting the subtle wince she tried to hide. Pulling 9 Gs extracted a physical toll few civilians could comprehend, like having a 2,000-pound weight compressed against every inch of your body, while vision narrowed to a pinpoint, and blood struggled to reach your brain. Sarah walked across the tarmac, aware of the stares that followed her. Not just because she was one of only 7 female F-35 pilots in the Air Force, but because she was Storm Thornton's daughter, legacy of a man whose aerial exploits had become legend, whose combat footage was still shown at Top Gun, and whose mysterious disappearance 17 years ago remained classified. "Captain Thornton," Hayes called out, "a word." "Sir," Sarah replied, standing at perfect attention. "That maneuver is explicitly prohibited during standard training exercises," Hayes said firmly. "It exceeds safety parameters and puts a $100 million aircraft at risk." "With respect, Colonel, the Cobra is within operational capacity of the aircraft," Sarah replied evenly. "And in contested airspace against fifth-generation fighters, it may be the difference between coming home and not." Hayes studied her for a long moment, the same unflinching gaze as her father, the same stubborn certainty. "Your father said almost exactly that to me 22 years ago over Kuwait," Hayes finally said, "right before he shot down 3 MiGs in under 2 minutes. A flicker of emotion crossed Sarah's face, pride, pain, longing, gone so quickly that someone less observant would have missed it entirely. Her father's legacy was both shield and burden. "You've got a call from command," Hayes said. "Briefing room now." In the briefing room, a secure video terminal displayed the insignia of Joint Special Operations Command. The screen flickered, revealing Admiral Charles Donovan, silver-haired and stern-faced. Sarah snapped to attention, recognizing him instantly, not just as deputy commander of JSOC, but as her father's former wingman. The man who had come to their house 17 years ago to inform her mother that Robert Storm, Thornton's F-14, had gone down during a classified operation. That there was no body to bury. "At ease, Captain," Donovan said, his voice a graveled bass. "You've been selected for Operation Eagle Storm." Sarah maintained her composure, though her mind raced. Eagle Storm was a classified joint operation supporting SEAL teams in contested territory, a mission profile typically reserved for pilots with combat deployments. "I didn't select you because you're the most experienced," Donovan continued. "I selected you because you're the best. Your G tolerance exceeds 98% of active combat pilots, and you've mastered maneuvers in the F-35 that most pilots don't attempt until they've logged twice your flight hours." He paused, something unspoken passing behind his eyes. "There's also the matter of your security clearance. Your father ensured you'd have the highest level available to someone of your rank. He anticipated situations like this." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Every mention of her father was like pressing on a bruise that never fully healed. "The mission requires coordination with SEAL Team 6. You'll be temporarily assigned to Naval Air Station Coronado, effective immediately. You are the first Air Force pilot embedded directly with a SEAL operation under the new Joint Strike Initiative. Many people want this initiative to fail, Captain. Remember that." The screen went blank, leaving Sarah alone with the implications. The Joint Strike Initiative was born from a diplomatic incident in the South China Sea 6 months ago, a confrontation where lack of coordination between Navy and Air Force assets had nearly escalated into open conflict with Chinese forces. And they had chosen her to be the test case. Before leaving her quarters, Sarah pulled a small wooden box from her locker, the only personal item she allowed herself on base. Inside lay her father's weathered dog tags and gold pilot wings. She'd carried them to every deployment, every training mission. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," she whispered. "I promised at your funeral and I keep my promises." The next morning, Sarah flew her F-35 to Coronado, the California coastline appearing as a golden ribbon separating desert from Pacific. Unlike the open expanses of Nellis, NAS Coronado was compact, nestled on the narrow peninsula separating San Diego Bay from the ocean, home of America's elite naval special warfare community. As she landed, a small welcoming committee waited with rigid posture and neutral expressions. All except one, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose chest displayed the trident insignia of the SEALs, his face bearing a scar from temple to jaw. "Captain Thornton," he said, extending his hand. "Commander David Matthews, SEAL Team 6. I'll be your primary operational contact here." His grip was firm but not challenging, a small but significant courtesy. "The Admiral said you were coming," Matthews continued. "Said you're the best stick in the Air Force. That remains to be seen." From anyone else, it might have sounded like a challenge. From Matthews, it was simply a statement of fact. Sarah followed Matthews across the tarmac, aware of the stares from naval personnel, some curious, others openly hostile. "You're something of a unicorn around here," Matthews said quietly. "Air Force on a naval base is unusual enough. Female fighter pilot assigned to special operations. Unprecedented." "And Storm Thornton's daughter," Sarah added, having long since learned to address the elephant in the room before others could. Matthew's stride faltered almost imperceptibly. "Your father extracted my team from a hot LZ in Iraq back in '02, took fire that would have downed any other pilot, saved 16 lives that day, including mine." He glanced at her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Never got to thank him before he disappeared." They reached the administration building, where Matthews paused before knocking on a door marked simply, "Commanding Officer." "Word of advice," he said. "Barrett is old-school Navy, combat-decorated traditionalist, doesn't believe in the Joint Strike Initiative, doesn't think Air Force belongs on his base, and definitely doesn't think women belong in combat roles. He offered the ghost of a smile. So you're basically his nightmare scenario. Sarah straightened her uniform, squaring her shoulders. I've been someone's nightmare scenario my entire career, Commander. Colonel Thomas Barrett stood behind his desk, a man carved from granite and tradition. At 55, his face bore the weathering of decades at sea and in combat, his silver-shot black hair cut regulation short. Captain Sarah Thornton reporting as ordered, sir, Sarah said, saluting crisply. Captain Barrett replied, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. I've reviewed your file, impressive scores, advanced tactical qualifications, multiple commendations. He paused. And yet not a single day of actual combat experience. With respect, Colonel, I've logged over 300 hours in the most advanced combat simulators available. Simulators, Barrett interrupted, the word falling like a stone, where the worst consequence of failure is a reset button. He moved around the desk, his posture radiating authority. This isn't some Air Force tech demonstration, Captain. SEAL Team 6 conducts high-risk operations where failure means dead operators. My operators. Men with families, with children who want their fathers to come home. The emphasis on fathers wasn't subtle. I understand completely, sir, Sarah replied, maintaining eye contact. That's precisely why I've spent thousands of hours mastering every aspect of close air support in contested airspace. My job is to ensure your men come home. Your job, Barrett countered, is to observe naval operations and report back to your Air Force superiors about interoperability potential. You will not be flying combat missions from my base. The door opened, admitting a lean, hawkish man with lieutenant colonel insignia. Something about his calculating gaze immediately put Sarah on alert. Captain Thornton, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Garrett, Barrett said. He'll be your liaison officer during your visit. Garrett extended his hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. I'll be overseeing your integration into our operational protocols, Captain, ensuring everything proceeds according to proper naval doctrine. Tomorrow morning, 600, tactical briefing, Garrett added. Don't be late. His expression suggested he fully expected her to be precisely that. After being dismissed, Sarah met Lieutenant Jennifer Chen, a logistics specialist Matthews had sent to help her navigate naval protocol. Garrett runs the briefings like interrogations, Chen warned her. He'll try to trip you up, make you look unprepared. His favorite tactic is calling on people without warning to analyze tactical situations with incomplete information. The next morning in the tactical briefing room, Garrett outlined a mission involving SEAL extraction through mountainous terrain. Sarah noticed a potential issue with the designated flight path that would force aircraft to maintain predictable trajectories within range of potential surface-to-air threats. When Garrett asked for questions, deliberately skipping over her, Sarah raised her hand anyway. Captain Thornton, the Air Force perspective. His tone made it clear he expected criticism. The flight path is solid for most scenarios, she began, acknowledging the work before offering alternatives. However, if we shift to Grid Echo 7, we could maintain better communications relay for the extraction teams while providing multiple attack vectors against potential SAM sites here and here. She indicated two ridgelines where the terrain offered natural concealment. Garrett's expression hardened. Captain, this isn't an Air Force simulation. This is real combat coordination. If you want to play with theories, go back to Nellie's. It's not theory, sir, Sarah replied evenly. It's applied topographical analysis using the same principles naval aviators employed during operations in Afghanistan's Korangal Valley. Barrett, who had remained silent, now fixed Sarah with an appraising look. "You've studied naval air operations in Afghanistan." "Yes, sir. Particularly close air support missions involving SEAL teams in contested mountainous terrain. My father maintained extensive notes on joint operations that proved invaluable." "Your suggestion is noted, Captain," Barrett said after a moment. "We'll proceed with the original plan." After the briefing, Matthews informed Sarah that Garrett had added her to that day's SEER training rotation: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, the military's most physically and psychologically demanding training. "That's not standard protocol for visiting officers," she said carefully. "No," Matthews agreed. "It's not, which should tell you everything you need to know about Garrett's intentions." Sarah outperformed expectations, becoming one of only 3 participants who avoided capture during the grueling exercise, navigating 35 miles of punishing terrain overnight using techniques her father had taught her. When Garrett arrived the next morning to find her among the successful evaders, his hostility became even more pronounced. Later that day, an emergency situation arose. Lieutenant Commander Kevin Sullivan, an FA-18 pilot, had gone down in the Gulf of Mexico during a Category 3 hurricane. His emergency beacon was active, but rescue assets couldn't penetrate the storm front. Sarah studied the meteorological data and spotted a weakness in the storm structure, a narrow corridor where wind patterns created a temporary reduction in turbulence. "Sir, the F-35 can penetrate those conditions." Garrett scoffed. "No aircraft can safely navigate a Category 3 hurricane, Captain." Sarah pointed out the corridor on the display. "A pilot with advanced all-weather training could exploit that gap." "That's threading a needle in a tornado," Barrett said skeptically. "Even if possible in theory, we don't have a pilot with that level of specialized training available." "You do, sir," Sarah said quietly. "Me." Matthews revealed that Sarah specialized in extreme weather penetration during her advanced tactical training. Barrett, weighing a life against the risks, made his decision. "Prepare your aircraft, Captain. You launch in 30 minutes." As Sarah prepared for takeoff, Matthews approached. "You should know something about Sullivan. He's been one of the most vocal critics of female combat pilots in the Navy. Wrote a paper arguing that physiological differences make women inherently unsuited for high-G combat operations." "That changes nothing, Commander," Sarah replied without hesitation. The F-35 roared down the runway. Within 20 minutes, Sarah approached the towering wall of dark clouds shot through with lightning, the sea beneath a churning cauldron of white-capped fury. Where most pilots saw an impenetrable barrier, Sarah saw patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. The aircraft hit the outer bands of the storm, immediately buffeted by winds exceeding 80 knots. Lightning flashed dangerously close, playing havoc with her instruments. Then came the G-forces. As the F-35 encountered a powerful updraft, Sarah felt herself pressed down with crushing pressure. Her vision began to narrow, the first signs of G-induced loss of consciousness. Training took over. She tensed her lower body muscles, forcing blood back toward her brain, fighting to maintain consciousness. For 3 excruciating seconds, Sarah hovered on the edge of blackout. Then the updraft released its grip, and the F-35 plunged into a downdraft equally severe. The aircraft dropped hundreds of feet in seconds, alarms blaring. Suddenly, the F-35 broke through into the storm's eye. Sarah spotted a small yellow life raft bobbing among 20-foot waves, and a figure waving desperately. She reduced altitude and deployed a rescue harness on a reinforced cable, maintaining precise position above the wildly moving raft. Sullivan caught the harness with his good arm and secured it. As Sarah began retracting the cable, The F-35 protested, warnings flashing as the fighter, designed for air combat, not rescue operations, strained against parameters its designers never intended it to face. Entering the storm wall again, with Sullivan dangling 60 feet below, was suicidal. Sarah made a split-second decision, maneuvering the aircraft so Sullivan could swing toward the partially released canopy. In a heart-stopping moment, he caught the edge and pulled himself through the impossibly small gap behind her seat. That, Sullivan gasped, was the craziest damn thing I've ever seen a pilot do. "Save the review for my performance report," Sarah replied, focusing on finding the exit corridor before it closed completely. When they finally landed at Coronado, dozens of naval personnel had gathered to witness something unprecedented. An Air Force pilot in a fighter aircraft, not designed for rescue operations, extracting a Navy pilot from conditions that specialized rescue aircraft couldn't penetrate. As medical personnel approached, Sullivan turned to Sarah. "I don't understand. Why would you risk your life like that for me, after what I've said about female pilots?" "Because that's what we do, Commander," Sarah replied steadily. "When another pilot is down, nothing else matters. Not service branch, not gender, not personal opinions. Just bringing you home." Sullivan straightened despite his injuries and, in full view of everyone assembled, rendered a perfect regulation salute to Sarah. "Thank you, Captain Thornton. I was wrong about you. About a lot of things." Later, in a secure communication with Admiral Donovan, Sarah learned that Sullivan had been carrying classified reconnaissance data that could not fall into unauthorized hands. "The Joint Chiefs are pleased with the outcome," Donovan said. "Your actions exemplify exactly why the Joint Strike Initiative was created." Donovan leaned closer to the camera. "Your father would be proud, Captain. He always said you'd surpass him someday." The casual reference sent a jolt through Sarah. "Sir, my father's crash report indicated you were the last person to have contact with him before his aircraft went down. Is there anything about that mission that—" "That will be all for now, Captain," Donovan interrupted, his expression closing like a steel door. Afterward, Barrett studied Sarah for a long moment. "In 27 years of naval service, I've never seen anything like what you did today. It violated a dozen protocols. It risked a $100 million aircraft. By conventional metrics, it was reckless bordering on insubordinate." He paused. "It was also exactly what Robert Thornton would have done, and it saved a pilot everyone else had written off as unsavable." Tomorrow morning, 600 SEAL Team 6 deploys on a priority mission. "Complex extraction, contested airspace, minimal margin for error," Barrett continued. "I want you flying that support mission, Captain, not observing, not advising, flying." As Sarah left, she caught sight of Garrett watching from the corridor, his expression dark with undisguised hostility. Beyond him stood Matthews, who fell into step beside her. "Hell of a day, Captain. You've done the impossible twice, survived a hurricane and earned Barrett's respect." "I'm not sure which was more difficult," Sarah replied with a small smile. Matthews glanced around before continuing quietly. "Garrett was on a secure call right after your rescue mission. I couldn't hear everything, but he mentioned your name and Operation Tempest. Ring any bells?" Sarah felt a chill. Tempest had been her father's call sign, but she'd never heard of any operation by that name, certainly nothing that would still be active 17 years after his disappearance. "No," she said carefully, "but I intend to find out." "Be careful," Matthews warned. "Garrett has connections above Barrett's pay grade, and there's something off about how quickly Donovan inserted you into this base, like he was expecting resistance but determined to place you here specifically." "Whatever's happening," Sarah said quietly, I need allies I can trust. Are you volunteering, Commander?" Matthews studied her for a long moment. "Your father saved my life once. I never got to repay that debt. Maybe this is how I start." As night fell, Sarah stood alone on the deserted flight line, her father's weathered dog tags warm in her palm. "I'm getting closer to the truth," she whispered. "Whatever happened to you, whatever Tempest means, I'm going to find out." In the distance, thunder rumbled over the Pacific, nature's response, or perhaps something more. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Sarah Thornton, daughter of a legend and forging her own path through skies few dared to navigate, would meet it head-on. Like father, like daughter, the phoenix in the storm. Sleep came in fragments for Sarah, her mind replaying fragments of the day's events against the backdrop of thunder that rolled across the San Diego coastline. Each time she drifted off, she saw Sullivan dangling beneath her aircraft, the storm's fury threatening to tear him away. Then the image would morph into something else. A different pilot, a different storm, 17 years ago. Her father. She woke at 400, a full hour before her alarm, the room still dark save for the faint red glow of her tactical watch. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, the pre-mission routine ingrained after years of training. Stretch, hydrate, focus. 90 minutes to mission briefing. The base was already stirring as Sarah made her way toward the operations center, the air tinged with salt and jet fuel. The sky remained dark, but the eastern horizon showed the first hint of gray, dawn preparing to break over the Pacific. She passed two petty officers who paused their conversation to render salutes, a small gesture, but significant after yesterday's events. Word traveled fast on military bases. Commander Matthews waited outside the operations center, his face betraying no sign of the early hour. Only the coffee mug in his hand suggested he was human rather than machine. "Sleep well, Captain?" he asked as she approached. "Like a baby," Sarah lied, "straight through the night." The slight narrowing of Matthew's eyes told her he recognized the falsehood but wouldn't challenge it. SEAL operators understood the value of maintaining appearance, especially before missions. "Barrett is already inside," Matthews said. "So is Garrett." Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Garrett remained a threat despite yesterday's triumph. The operations center hummed with pre-mission activity. Screens displayed satellite imagery, weather patterns, and encrypted communication channels. A three-dimensional tactical map occupied the center table, showing rugged coastal terrain with elevation markers. Colonel Barrett stood studying the map, his silver-shot hair catching the blue light of the displays. He acknowledged Sarah's entrance with a curt nod. "Captain," he said, prompt as expected. Garrett stood across the table, his expression carefully neutral, though the tension in his jaw suggested otherwise. 4 SEAL officers clustered nearby, studying equipment manifests, Matthews' team for the mission. "Gentlemen," Barrett said, bringing the room to attention, "we have a developing situation in the Gulf of Oman." The main screen shifted to display a vessel, commercial freighter, medium tonnage, flying a Liberian flag. The Pacific Voyager, ostensibly a cargo vessel hauling industrial equipment. 18 hours ago, it diverted from its filed course and stopped responding to hails. Satellite imagery picked up unusual activity on deck shortly before communication ceased. Barrett tapped a control, and the image zoomed in to show personnel moving equipment on the ship's deck. Even in the grainy footage, their movements carried military precision. "We believe hostile elements have seized the vessel. Of particular concern is its cargo manifest, which includes several containers of classified naval communication hardware bound for our facilities in Bahrain." Sarah studied the footage. noting details that civilian eyes might miss: the positioning of the armed figures, the way they maintained zones of control. "These aren't standard pirates," she observed. "Their positioning, their discipline, they're showing military training." Garrett shot her a look of irritation at the interruption, but Barrett nodded. "Correct, Captain. Intelligence suggests this is a specialized unit with state sponsorship, though we're avoiding official attribution at this point." "Our mission," Matthews interjected, "is asset denial. Board the vessel, secure or destroy the sensitive equipment, extract any surviving crew." Barrett expanded the tactical display. "SEAL Team 6 will deploy via halo insertion at 200 local time. Weather conditions predict partial cloud cover, winds at 15 knots. Captain Thornton will provide close air support in her F-35. Garrett shifted, clearly uncomfortable with this assignment, but remained silent as Barrett continued. "Captain, you'll establish air superiority and provide tactical oversight. Your stealth capabilities are essential. We need eyes above without alerting potential reinforcements in the area. Rules of engagement are restrictive given the commercial nature of the vessel. No strikes without positive identification and direct authorization." Sarah processed the parameters rapidly. "What about recovery, sir?" "Once the team secures the objective, they'll extract via rib to the USS Abraham Lincoln, currently positioned 30 nautical miles southeast. Your job is to ensure they reach that extraction point without company." The briefing continued with specific details: communication protocols, contingency plans, intelligence on possible hostile forces. Sarah absorbed it all, mentally plotting flight paths and fuel calculations. As the briefing concluded, Garrett approached, his voice low enough that only Sarah could hear. "I still think this is a mistake, Captain. Combat isn't simulation. People die when decisions are made by those unprepared for the reality of engagement." Sarah met his gaze evenly. "I appreciate your concern for the mission, Colonel." "It's not concern for the mission," Garrett replied, ice in his voice. "It's concern for those men, my men." "They're my men too now," Sarah said quietly, "and I don't intend to lose a single one." Garrett's expression hardened. "You remind me of your father. He had the same arrogance, the same certainty that he knew better than everyone else. Look where that got him." Before Sarah could respond, Barrett called Garrett away, leaving her with the cutting remark hanging in the air between them. The reference to her father wasn't casual. It carried intent, knowledge, something Garrett wanted her to know he possessed. Matthews appeared at her elbow. "Don't let him get to you," he said quietly. "Garrett has been trying to scuttle the Joint Strike Initiative from the beginning. This isn't about you, it's about territory." But Sarah wasn't so certain. The mention of her father felt too specific, too deliberate. "I need to prep my aircraft," she said, pushing the thought aside for now. "I'll see you at final briefing." The flight line buzzed with activity as ground crews prepared aircraft for the day's operations. Sarah's F-35 sat in its designated spot, technicians swarming around it like worker bees, checking systems and loading armaments according to the mission parameters. Chief Petty Officer Wilson, a weathered veteran with 30 years of naval aviation experience, approached as Sarah conducted her external inspection. "She's ready, Captain," Wilson said, handing over the inspection tablet. "Full stealth configuration, sensors at 100%. Sarah reviewed the checklist, noting the weapon's load, lighter than standard combat configuration, optimized for precision rather than force. The targeting system was showing drift during yesterday's mission. Has that been corrected? Wilson nodded, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Most pilots wouldn't have noticed the minor calibration issue amid the storm chaos. Yes, ma'am. Recalibrated the entire suite at 200. You've got zero drift now. Thank you, Chief. Sarah handed back the tablet. I appreciate the thoroughness. Just doing my job, Captain. Wilson hesitated, then added, that was some flying yesterday. Sullivan's got 3 kids. You brought their father home. The simple statement carried more weight than any formal commendation. Sarah nodded, words unnecessary between them. As Wilson returned to his duties, Sarah continued her inspection, running her hand along the aircraft's sleek contours, a tactile connection with the machine that would soon become an extension of her body and will. Her thoughts drifted to her father's words from years ago. An aircraft isn't just metal and circuits, Sarah. It's alive in its own way. Learn its voice, its habits, its quirks. In combat, that relationship might be all that stands between you and eternity. The memory was interrupted by the approach of a naval officer Sarah hadn't met, a lieutenant commander with intelligence insignia. Captain Thornton, he said, offering a crisp salute. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Fleming, Naval Intelligence. Do you have a moment? Sarah returned the salute. Of course, Commander. Fleming glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. I wanted to personally brief you on some additional intelligence regarding the Pacific Voyager situation. Walk with me. They moved toward a quieter section of the flight line. Fleming kept his voice low, professional. The official briefing covered the essentials, but there's contextual information you should know. The communication hardware on that vessel isn't standard equipment. It's part of a next-generation secure network that would give its possessor significant advantages in monitoring our naval deployments throughout the region. Sarah processed this. So this isn't just about denying them our technology. It's about preventing a strategic intelligence advantage. Exactly, Fleming nodded. There's also the matter of the ship's crew, 23 personnel, mostly Filipino and Indian nationals with American security contractors. We've lost contact with all of them. Hostages complicate the scenario, Sarah noted. Yes, but there's something else. Fleming hesitated. One of the security contractors is former Navy. Daniel Preston, ex-SEAL, served with Garrett in Afghanistan. Sarah's attention sharpened. Personal connection. They were close, went through Bud S together, deployed multiple times. Garrett pushed hard for this mission when Preston was identified among the security team. The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind. Garrett's heightened hostility, his insistence on controlling the operation. Thank you for the context, Commander, she said. I'll factor it into my approach. Fleming nodded. Just thought you should know all the variables. Good hunting, Captain. As he walked away, Sarah turned back to her aircraft, the mission now carrying additional complexity. Garrett's stake was personal, which explained his increased resistance to her involvement. But it didn't explain his comment about her father, or the reference to Operation Tempest Matthews had overheard. The hours before mission launch passed in careful preparation. Sarah reviewed intelligence updates, studied the latest satellite imagery, and memorized every detail of the operation area. She maintained the laser focus that had defined her career, compartmentalizing questions about her father, about Garrett, about the mysterious connections between past and present. At 1900 hours, the final briefing assembled all mission participants. Matthews and his SEAL team, now geared up for Halo insertion, occupied one side of the room. Support personnel, intelligence officers, and communications specialists filled the remaining space. Garrett stood near Barrett at the front, his expression grim. Latest intelligence confirms our assessment, Barrett began without preamble. Hostile forces remain in control of the vessel, which has maintained its position approximately 50 nautical miles off the Omani coast. Weather conditions are holding as predicted. Halo insertion will proceed at 200 local time. He turned to Sarah. Captain Thornton will launch 90 minutes prior to establish aerial oversight and confirm conditions before your jump. Questions? A SEAL lieutenant raised his hand. Contingency for unexpected aerial threats, sir. The F-35 sensor suite should provide early warning of any approach, Barrett replied. Captain Thornton is authorized to engage aerial threats at her discretion to protect the insertion team. Garrett stepped forward. I'll be coordinating from the USS Lincoln's Combat Information Center. All major tactical decisions will route through me to ensure alignment with broader operational parameters. The statement was professional on its surface, but the subtext was clear to Sarah. Garrett was ensuring he maintained control, regardless of her role in the air. The briefing continued with final confirmations of timelines, communication protocols, and extraction procedures. Throughout, Sarah noted the occasional glances from Matthew's team, not hostile like before, but evaluative, measuring. Yesterday's rescue had earned her a hearing, but this mission would determine whether she gained their trust. As the briefing concluded, Matthews approached her. "My team's ready," he said simply. "We'll be counting on your eyes up there." "You'll have them," Sarah replied. "Complete coverage, zero gaps." Matthews studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "Garrett isn't the only one with personal stakes in this. Preston trained most of us. He's family." Sarah nodded her understanding. "We'll bring him home, Commander, all of them." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the cockpit of her F-35, running through final pre-flight checks as the powerful aircraft hummed to life around her. Night had fallen completely, the stars obscured by the marine layer rolling in from the Pacific. Perfect conditions for a stealth insertion. Viper 01, this is Coronado Tower. You are cleared for takeoff on runway 27, winds light and variable. Copy that, Tower. Viper 01 rolling. The F-35's afterburners ignited with a controlled roar, pushing Sarah back into her seat as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. In seconds, she was airborne, banking toward the refueling tanker that would top off her tanks before the long transit to the operation area. The mid-air refueling proceeded with textbook precision, the F-35 connecting smoothly with the tanker's boom. As fuel flowed into her aircraft, Sarah observed the C-130 that would carry Matthew's team positioned nearby, following the same route toward their target. Once refueling completed, Sarah accelerated ahead, her aircraft climbing to operational altitude and engaging its full stealth capabilities. The F-35 became virtually invisible to conventional radar, a ghost in truth as well as callsign. The Gulf of Oman appeared below, a dark expanse broken only by the occasional light of commercial vessels. Sarah's advanced sensor suite painted a detailed tactical picture, identifying and categorizing every vessel within 50 nautical miles. Command Viper 01. I have eyes on the area of operation, beginning surveillance pattern. Copy, Viper 01, came Garrett's voice from the USS Lincoln CIC. Maintain altitude and provide situational updates. Jumper is 30 minutes from insertion point. Sarah began a wide orbit of the target vessel, her sensors collecting detailed information on the ship's current status. The Pacific Voyager sat dark on the water, running without navigation lights, a clear violation of maritime law and further confirmation of hostile control. Command Viper 01. Target vessel is maintaining position, minimal deck activity visible. Infrared shows approximately 15 personnel on upper decks, armed posture. No other vessels within 10 nautical miles. Copy that, Viper-01, Garrett replied. Continue monitoring. Sarah maintained her surveillance pattern, the F-35 systems automatically tracking and categorizing potential threats, while she focused on the broader tactical picture. The minutes ticked by with methodical precision, each orbit bringing the Halo insertion team closer to their jump point. Viper-01, jumper is approaching drop coordinates, Garrett reported. Final confirmation of insertion conditions required. Sarah ran another comprehensive sensor sweep, checking wind speeds at various altitudes, monitoring for any changes to the target vessel's status, and scanning for potential interference. Command, conditions are optimal for insertion. Wind speeds within parameters, target status unchanged, no aerial or surface threats detected. Copy that, jumper is commencing drop sequence. Sarah adjusted her flight path to provide optimal coverage of the drop zone, her sensors tracking as the rear ramp of the C-130 opened and 8 figures in tactical gear stepped into the void. Their silhouettes disappeared immediately into the darkness, their Halo equipment rendering them nearly as invisible as her aircraft. Jumper confirms 8 chutes deployed and tracking to target, ETA to vessel 6 minutes. Sarah continued her surveillance, tracking the SEAL team's descent through layers of data rather than visual confirmation. Their specialized chutes allowed for a silent, precise approach to the vessel from high altitude, virtually undetectable to those below. Viper-01, we have potential activity on the southeast quadrant of the vessel, she reported, noting a thermal signature movement. 2 individuals moving toward the port bow. Copy, Viper-01, relaying to insertion team. Sarah watched as Matthew's team adjusted their approach vector slightly, aiming now for the starboard side to avoid the detected movement. Their coordination was flawless, a testament to countless training jumps and real-world operations. Command, SEAL team has successfully boarded the vessel, Sarah reported several minutes later, her infrared sensors detecting the precise moment Matthew's team made contact with the ship's deck. No reaction from hostile forces detected. Copy that. Maintain overwatch and standby for potential support requests. The operation now entered its most critical phase. Matthew's team would move through the vessel methodically, neutralizing threats, locating hostages, and securing or destroying the sensitive technology. Sarah's role shifted to providing tactical intelligence and standing ready to deliver precision fire support if required. For 23 minutes, the operation proceeded according to plan. Sarah tracked the SEAL team's progress through the ship via their encrypted communications and thermal signatures. They encountered minimal resistance on the upper decks, suggesting the bulk of the hostile force was concentrated elsewhere. Viper-01, be advised, Matthew's voice came through suddenly, tension evident despite his measured tone. We've located the hostages, engine room secured in place. 21 confirmed alive including Preston, 2 casualties. Copy that, SEAL 6, Garrett responded. Status of package. Negative on package location. Continuing search. Hostiles appear more numerous than intelligence suggested. We count 22 neutralized, but indicators of additional forces below decks. Sarah's tactical display updated with the new information, her mind rapidly recalculating probabilities and scenarios. Command, Viper-01. Recommend SEAL team extract hostages first, then continue search for package. Thermal imaging suggests concentration of personnel 2 decks below current position. A pause, then Garrett's response. Negative, Viper-01. Primary objective remains the package. Hostages are secondary priority. The statement hung in the air for a moment before Matthews replied, his voice carefully neutral. Copy that, command. Proceeding to lower decks. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cockpit temperature. Garrett was prioritizing the technology over immediate hostage extraction, including his former teammate. Something didn't align. She adjusted her sensor focus, examining the ship's surroundings more carefully. Nothing appeared immediately suspicious, but years of training had taught her to trust her instincts when they signaled caution. SEAL 6 to command. We've encountered heavy resistance on the second level, taking fire from multiple positions. The transmission was punctuated by the unmistakable sound of close-quarters gunfire. Status SEAL 6, Garrett demanded. 2 operators wounded, non-critical. Hostiles well entrenched around what appears to be the target location. Request permission for alternative approach. Negative SEAL 6. Continue as planned, clock is running. Sarah frowned at the exchange. Garrett's insistence on pushing forward despite unexpected resistance seemed questionable given the tactical situation. Viper 01 to SEAL 6, she transmitted, making a calculated decision. I'm picking up a potential alternate route through the portside maintenance shaft, less defended based on thermal signatures. She was overstepping protocol by communicating directly with the team rather than routing through command, but the tactical advantage seemed worth the breach. Copy that, Viper 01, Matthews replied after a brief pause, adjusting approach. Garrett's voice cut in immediately. Viper 01, maintain protocol. Tactical decisions route through command. Copy, command, Sarah responded smoothly, providing real-time intelligence as per mission parameters. The diplomatic response masked her growing concern. Garrett's behavior suggested motivations beyond mission success. The operation continued with increasing tension. Matthews' team adapted to the new intelligence, circumventing the heaviest resistance and making progress toward their objective. Sarah maintained her vigilant orbit, processing masses of sensor data while simultaneously tracking broader patterns around the vessel. Command, Viper 01. I'm detecting a fast-moving surface contact approaching from the northwest, 12 nautical miles out, speed 40 knots. Garrett's response was immediate. Classification. Profile matches a modified patrol boat. Military grade, running dark. Possible reinforcements, Garrett concluded. Continue tracking but maintain your primary focus on the target vessel. Sarah complied, but something about the approaching vessel triggered her tactical instincts. Its course was too precise, its timing too convenient. SEAL 6 to command. We've secured the package. Beginning extraction protocol with hostages. Copy that, SEAL 6, Garrett replied. Primary extraction route remains as planned. Sarah studied her tactical display, assessing the converging elements. Matthews' team was now moving hostages toward the extraction point while carrying the secured technology. Meanwhile, the unidentified vessel continued its approach, now 8 nautical miles out. Command, recommend SEAL team divert to secondary extraction point on starboard side. Approaching vessel will have direct line of sight to primary extraction point in approximately 7 minutes. Another pause from Garrett. Negative, Viper 01. Primary extraction route offers fastest egress. SEAL 6 continue as planned. Something was very wrong. The tactical mathematics didn't support Garrett's decision. The approaching vessel presented a clear threat to the primary extraction point, yet he was insisting they maintain course. Sarah made her decision. SEAL 6, Viper 01. Approaching vessel will reach visual range of primary extraction point before you complete loading. Strongly recommend secondary extraction point. Viper-01, you are exceeding your authority, Garrett cut in sharply. SEAL-6, disregard and proceed as ordered. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt much longer. SEAL-6 to command. With respect, we're adjusting to secondary extraction point based on tactical assessment. Matthews had made his choice, siding with Sarah's evaluation over Garrett's direct order. The implications were significant, but there was no time to consider them as events accelerated. Unknown vessel now at 5 nautical miles and maintaining course, Sarah reported. Viper-01 requesting permission to execute warning maneuver. Negative, Viper-01, Garrett replied, tension evident in his voice. Maintain altitude and observation only. The restriction made no tactical sense. A warning maneuver, a high-speed, low-altitude pass, would signal to the approaching vessel that it had been detected without requiring direct engagement. Standard protocol for protecting an extraction. Sarah watched as Matthews' team reached the secondary extraction point, beginning to load hostages into their rigid inflatable boats for transport to the USS Lincoln. They would be exposed during this phase, vulnerable if the approaching vessel was indeed hostile. The pieces clicked together in her mind. Garrett's insistence on the primary extraction point despite the clear tactical disadvantage, his refusal to authorize a warning maneuver, his earlier prioritization of the technology over the hostages. Viper-01 to SEAL-6, she transmitted on a secondary channel, bypassing the command circuit. Be advised, I believe this may be a compromised operation. Unknown vessels approach vector suggests precise knowledge of your primary extraction point. Copy that, Viper-01, came Matthews' terse reply. We were thinking the same, expediting extraction. Sarah returned to the main channel. Command, unknown vessel now at 3 nautical miles. Based on current course and speed, they will have visual contact with the target vessel in approximately 4 minutes. Maintain position, Viper-01, Garrett ordered. Do not engage unless fired upon. The restriction went beyond caution into the realm of endangerment. Sarah made her decision, banking the F-35 into a steep descent. Viper-01, what are you doing? Garrett demanded. Executing tactical assessment maneuver command, maintaining weapons safe. Sarah pushed the aircraft into a high-speed, low-altitude approach toward the unknown vessel. At 500 feet, she activated her targeting systems without weapon lock, a clear signal to anyone with military training that they had been identified and were being tracked. The effect was immediate. The vessel abruptly altered course, turning away from the Pacific Voyager and accelerating to maximum speed. Unknown vessel is retreating, heading 270, speed increasing to 45 knots, Sarah reported. Viper-01, you directly contravened orders. Garrett's voice was cold with fury. Return to assigned altitude immediately. Executing tactical perimeter sweep command, Sarah replied professionally, continuing to circle the area to ensure no additional threats were approaching. SEAL-6, status of extraction. Extraction proceeding, Matthews reported. 11 hostages secure, continuing loading operations. The next 10 minutes passed in tense efficiency as Matthews' team completed loading the hostages and secured equipment. Throughout, Sarah maintained her protective orbit, sensors scanning for any additional threats while the mysterious vessel continued its retreat. SEAL-6 to command, extraction complete. All hostages secured, package secure, proceeding to rendezvous point. Copy that, SEAL-6, Garrett acknowledged. Return to base immediately. Viper 01, return to assigned altitude and proceed to base, he added, the formal phrasing barely masking his anger. Sarah complied, bringing the F-35 back to its operational altitude while maintaining sensor coverage of Matthew's extraction boats as they sped toward the USS Lincoln. The mission had succeeded despite the complications. Hostages rescued, sensitive technology secured, no casualties among the SEAL team. But questions multiplied in Sarah's mind as she set course for the long flight back to base. Garrett's actions had endangered the mission rather than supported it. The approaching vessel had known exactly where to intercept the primary extraction point. And somehow, all of it felt connected to her father and the mysterious Operation Tempest. 2 hours later, as Sarah approached Coronado, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, she received unexpected orders to divert to the USS Lincoln rather than returning to base. No explanation was provided. She complied, adjusting her course toward the aircraft carrier visible on the horizon. As she executed a perfect landing on the carrier's deck, the massive ship's crew moved with practiced efficiency to secure her aircraft. A deck officer approached as Sarah climbed down from the cockpit. "Captain Thornton, Admiral Donovan requests your presence in the flag briefing room immediately." Sarah felt a momentary jolt of surprise. Donovan was aboard the Lincoln. The Admiral's presence on an operational vessel during a relatively small-scale mission was unusual. "Lead the way," she replied, removing her helmet and following the officer across the busy flight deck. The flag briefing room was located deep within the carrier's superstructure, a secure space where the highest-level decisions were made. As Sarah was escorted inside, she found not only Admiral Donovan waiting, but also Colonel Barrett and a grim-faced Commander Matthews. Noticeably absent was Lieutenant Colonel Garrett. "Captain Thornton," Donovan said, his weathered face giving away nothing. "Your after-action report, please, verbal, direct, unfiltered." Sarah came to attention, processing the unusual request and the tense atmosphere. Something significant had occurred beyond her knowledge. "Sir, mission objectives were achieved successfully. SEAL Team 6 secured the classified technology and rescued 21 hostages, including the American security contractors. During extraction, an unidentified vessel approached on a course that suggested prior knowledge of the primary extraction point. I executed a warning maneuver which caused the vessel to retreat. All personnel and assets returned safely." "And Lieutenant Colonel Garrett's actions during the operation," Donovan pressed. Sarah hesitated, weighing her words carefully. "Sir, several of Colonel Garrett's tactical decisions appeared to contravene optimal mission parameters. He insisted on the primary extraction point despite clear intelligence indicating it would expose the team to the approaching vessel. He also prioritized technology recovery over immediate hostage extraction and refused authorization for standard warning protocols." Donovan exchanged glances with Barrett before continuing. "Your assessment of his motivations." "Sir, I am not qualified to assess a superior officer's motivations," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Cut the protocol, Captain," Barrett interjected. "This is a secure debrief. Garrett is currently in custody pending investigation for potential compromise. We need your unfiltered assessment." The statement landed like a physical blow. Garrett in custody. Sarah reassessed the situation rapidly. "Based on tactical patterns, sir, I believe Colonel Garrett may have been attempting to expose SEAL Team 6 to interception during extraction. His insistence on the primary extraction point, despite clear tactical disadvantages, suggests he wanted them in a specific location at a specific time." Matthews nodded grimly. Matches our assessment. The approaching vessel was using encrypted communication protocols that match those stolen from our Bahrain facility 3 months ago. Someone gave them our extraction coordinates. When we confronted Garrett, Barrett added, we found communications equipment in his quarters that doesn't match any authorized devices. Preliminary examination suggests it's been used to transmit encoded data outside our secure networks. Sarah processed this information, the implications expanding outward. Sir, during a conversation yesterday, Garrett made specific reference to my father in a way that suggested personal knowledge about his disappearance. Commander Matthews also overheard Garrett mention Operation Tempest in connection with my name. Donovan's expression changed subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. Captain, he said after a measured pause, what do you know about Operation Tempest? Nothing beyond the name, sir. My father's call sign was Storm, but I've found no reference to any operation by that designation in declassified records. Donovan studied her for a long moment before turning to Barrett and Matthews. I need the room, gentlemen. The two officers nodded and departed without question, leaving Sarah alone with the Admiral. Donovan moved to a secure terminal, entered a complex authorization code, and retrieved a file. What I'm about to share is classified above top secret, Captain. It remains active under special access protocols, which is why you found no record of it. He gestured for her to sit. It's also directly connected to your father's disappearance. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure as she took the offered seat. 17 years ago, Donovan began, your father was selected for a highly classified mission to extract a defecting Iranian nuclear scientist from a facility near the Strait of Hormuz. The mission was designated Operation Tempest, partly for his call sign, partly for the severe weather conditions forecasted for the extraction window. Donovan pulled up a map of the region. The plan involved your father flying a specially modified F-14 with enhanced stealth capabilities to a designated extraction point, retrieving the scientist, and returning through a narrow corridor of international airspace. He paused, his expression darkening. The mission went catastrophically wrong. Your father's aircraft was engaged by air defenses that shouldn't have known his approach vector. He reported taking fire, attempting evasive maneuvers, and then, Donovan gestured helplessly. His transmission cut off. No ejection was detected, no wreckage ever found. Sarah absorbed this information, connecting it to the fragments of memory she'd carried for 17 years. The official report stated mechanical failure over water. A cover story, Donovan confirmed. The true circumstances were classified to protect ongoing intelligence operations. We suspected a leak, but could never identify the source. Until now, Sarah said, the pieces clicking into place. Garrett. We believe so. The communication device found in his quarters bears striking similarities to equipment recovered in other counterintelligence operations targeting our naval deployments. The working theory is that Garrett has been passing classified information for years, possibly to state-sponsored proxies. Donovan leaned forward, his voice lowering. Captain, your assignment to this base wasn't coincidence. When your name came up for the Joint Strike Initiative, I recognized an opportunity. Garrett's reactions to you, particularly as Storm Thornton's daughter, might reveal something about his connection to your father's mission. I was bait, Sarah said, the realization landing without anger, only a cool assessment of operational logic. In a manner of speaking, Donovan acknowledged. Though your qualifications were genuine and your performance has exceeded even my expectations, your actions today likely saved Matthew's team from an ambush. Sarah processed this information methodically, compartmentalizing emotional responses as she'd been trained to do. "Sir, what happened to my father? Is there any evidence he survived?" Donovan's expression softened slightly. "The truth is, we don't know. Most of the intelligence community accepted the presumption of death given the circumstances. No ejection signal, no emergency beacon, no communication." He hesitated, then added, "But there were anomalies. 3 years after his disappearance, during a prisoner exchange with a non-state actor, one of the returned operatives reported hearing about an American pilot held in a private facility. The description matched your father, but we could never confirm it or locate the facility." Sarah felt a surge of conflicting emotions: hope, anger, determination. So he could still be alive. "It's unlikely after all this time," Donovan said gently, "but not impossible. What is certain is that Garrett's arrest may finally provide answers about what happened that night. He's refusing to cooperate currently, but counterintelligence specialists are building a case against him." Sarah straightened in her chair. "Sir, I want to be part of the investigation." Donovan shook his head. "That's not possible, Captain. You're too personally involved, and this remains a highly classified counterintelligence operation." "With respect, Admiral, that personal involvement makes me an asset. Garrett knows something about my father. If confronted by me directly, he might reveal information he'd withhold from standard interrogation." "It's against protocol," Donovan insisted. "So was selecting me for this assignment," Sarah countered. "You took that risk because you saw the tactical advantage. This is no different." Donovan considered her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded once sharply. "I'll authorize limited involvement strictly as an observer to intelligence debriefs, nothing more." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining professional composure despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "Don't thank me yet, Captain," Donovan said grimly. "Whatever we learn about your father may not bring comfort. Sometimes the truth comes at a high cost." "I've been paying that cost for 17 years, Admiral," Sarah said quietly. "Not knowing is worse than any truth." Donovan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Report to the Intelligence Center at 800 tomorrow. The first debriefing of Garrett is scheduled then." He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "Until then, get some rest. That's an order." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, rising to her feet. As she left the briefing room, her mind raced with new possibilities. For 17 years, she'd lived with the official story of her father's death: a mechanical failure, a crash at sea, no recovery possible. Now, suddenly, the narrative had shifted. Not an accident, but sabotage. Not a random tragedy, but a targeted betrayal. And most significantly, not certainty of death, but the faint, flickering possibility that Robert "Storm" Thornton might still be alive. Matthews waited in the corridor outside, his expression suggesting he'd been briefed at least partially on the situation. "Captain," he said by way of greeting, "they've assigned you quarters aboard for the night. I can show you the way." "Thank you, Commander," Sarah replied, falling into step beside him. They walked in silence through the carrier's labyrinthine passageways, the massive vessel humming with activity around them. Finally, Matthew spoke, his voice low. "I don't know what Donovan told you, but Garrett's activities go beyond today's operation. Counterintelligence has linked him to at least 3 compromised missions over the past 5 years. Good people died because of intelligence he leaked." Sarah absorbed this, the implications magnifying, "including potentially my father." Matthews nodded grimly. "The Admiral filled me in on the connection. For what it's worth, your actions today prevented history from repeating itself. My team would have been walking into a trap if we'd followed Garrett's instructions. They reached a small officer's stateroom. Matthews paused at the door. Your father was a legend among special operators. The missions he supported saved countless lives, including mine. Whatever happened to him, Matthews met her gaze directly. He deserved better than betrayal. Yes, Sarah agreed quietly, he did. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As Matthews departed, Sarah entered the small stateroom, closing the door behind her. Alone for the first time since the mission, she allowed the professional facade to fall away momentarily, sitting heavily on the narrow bunk as the day's revelations washed over her. Her father's disappearance, the defining trauma of her life, the event that had shaped her career and identity, had not been an accident. It had been sabotage, betrayal by someone inside the military he'd served with distinction. Possibly the same man who had just attempted to betray another team of Americans. Sarah removed her father's dog tags from her flight suit pocket, the metal warm from proximity to her body throughout the mission. She traced the embossed letters of his name with her thumb, a ritual repeated countless times over 17 years. I'm getting closer, she whispered to the empty room. Whatever happened, whoever's responsible, I'll find the truth. Outside the carrier's armored hull, the vast ocean stretched to the horizon, its depth still holding secrets from 17 years past. But for the first time since her father's disappearance, Sarah felt something she had long abandoned. Hope. Sarah woke instantly at the soft knock on her door, transitioning from sleep to full alertness in the space between heartbeats. The narrow bunk in the carrier's officer quarters had offered little comfort, but she'd slept deeply nonetheless, the aftermath of sustained adrenaline and emotional revelation. Captain Thornton, 10 minutes to briefing. The voice belonged to a young ensign, professional and clipped. Acknowledged, she replied, already on her feet. 9 minutes later, Sarah strode through the carrier's corridors toward the intelligence center, her uniform crisp despite the night spent aboard. The massive vessel thrummed with morning operations, sailors and officers moving with practiced efficiency through the labyrinthine passageways. Commander Matthews waited outside the intelligence center's secure entrance, his expression unreadable. Morning, Captain, he said, falling into step beside her. Donovan briefed me on your involvement. Garrett is already inside with the interrogation team. His status? Uncooperative. Hasn't said a word beyond demanding legal counsel. Matthews' jaw tightened. Counterintelligence has been building their case overnight. The evidence is substantial, not just today's incident but a pattern stretching back years. Sarah nodded, processing this. And my father's case. They're looking for connections, but it's complicated. Most of the original investigation materials are sealed or missing. 17 years is a long time in intelligence work. They reached a final security checkpoint, where a stone-faced Marine verified their identities and clearances, before admitting them to the intelligence center's inner sanctum. The room beyond was clinically modern, a stark contrast to the World War II-era aesthetic that dominated much of the carrier. Multiple monitors displayed data streams, surveillance footage, and analytical readouts. At the center stood Admiral Donovan, conferring quietly with a silver-haired woman in civilian clothes whose bearing suggested military background. Donovan turned as they entered. Captain Thornton, Commander Matthews. This is Director Laura Palmer, Naval Intelligence Counterespionage Division. Palmer extended her hand, her grip firm and appraising. Captain, your actions yesterday likely saved the lives of 8 operators and 21 civilians. Well done. Thank you, Director, Sarah replied evenly. I understand Admiral Donovan has briefed you on Operation Tempest and its connection to your father, Palmer continued. I've authorized your presence during Garrett's interrogation as an observer only. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. Palmer studied her for a moment longer, then nodded sharply. Garrett is in interview room 1. We're monitoring from the adjacent observation suite. He doesn't know you're aboard. The observation suite was compact but efficiently designed. One-way glass provided a clear view into the interrogation room where Lieutenant Colonel Richard Garrett sat at a metal table, hands free but under obvious guard. Two intelligence officers occupied the opposite side of the table, methodically working through what appeared to be background questions. Garrett looked smaller somehow, diminished by circumstances rather than physical constraints. His uniform remained impeccable, his posture military straight, but something essential had changed in his bearing, the subtle shift from predator to prey. We've been at this for 3 hours, Palmer explained quietly. Standard counterintelligence protocol. Establish baseline responses, verify known facts, build toward critical questions. Sarah studied Garrett through the glass, searching for some sign of the man who might have betrayed her father. What have you learned? Not enough, Palmer admitted. He's well trained, admits to minor protocol violations but denies any intentional compromise of operations. The communication device found in his quarters claims it's a personal project, an attempt to improve encryption for field operations. Palmer's tone made clear her assessment of this explanation, but we haven't been able to connect it conclusively to external transmissions yet. The interrogation continued with the relentless, methodical pace of professionals who understood that time and patience were their allies. Garrett answered each question with minimal information, his responses technically compliant but substantively empty. After 20 minutes, Palmer spoke into a discreet microphone. Introduce the Tempest materials now. Inside the interrogation room, one of the officers opened a new folder. Lieutenant Colonel, I'd like to discuss Operation Tempest. The change in Garrett was subtle but unmistakable. A momentary stillness, a fractional widening of the eyes, quickly controlled. I'm not familiar with any operation by that designation, he replied, voice steady. That's interesting, the interrogator continued, considering we have evidence of you discussing it as recently as 2 days ago. Garrett's expression remained neutral. You must be mistaken. Commander David Matthews overheard you mentioning Operation Tempest in connection with Captain Sarah Thornton, immediately following her rescue of Lieutenant Commander Sullivan. A flicker of something, anger, perhaps concern, crossed Garrett's face. Matthews is mistaken. Perhaps he misheard a different operation name. The interrogator removed a document from the folder. Operation Tempest was classified above top secret in 2008. It involved the extraction of an Iranian nuclear scientist by Captain Robert Storm Thornton. The operation failed when Captain Thornton's aircraft was engaged by air defenses that shouldn't have known his approach vector. Garrett remained silent, his breathing carefully controlled. Records indicate you were stationed at Naval Intelligence Gulf operations at the time. While you weren't directly involved in the operation planning, you had access to the secure communication network used to transmit the mission parameters. Thousands of personnel had similar access, Garrett countered. This is circumstantial at best. The interrogator slid forward a photograph, a younger Garrett standing with several other officers in desert camouflage. You served with Lieutenant Peter Harrison during that deployment. Harrison was later arrested for passing classified information to foreign agents. He was found with communication equipment remarkably similar to what we discovered in your quarters yesterday. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. We believe Harrison was your recruiter, the interrogator continued, and that after his arrest, you continued his work, becoming increasingly valuable to your handlers as you rose through the ranks. Speculation, Garrett replied coldly. I was cleared during the Harrison investigation. Yes, you were, but counterintelligence has new analytical tools now. We've identified digital signatures in classified information leaks over the past 15 years that match your access patterns. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Garrett's face, the first crack in his composure. The interrogator pressed forward. Lieutenant Colonel, we have enough to convene a court-martial already. The evidence from yesterday's operation alone is damning. What we're offering is an opportunity to cooperate in exchange for considerations regarding your sentence. Garrett's eyes narrowed. What specifically are you offering? Depending on the value of your cooperation, we could recommend against capital charges. The statement hung in the air, its implications clear. Treason during wartime operations could carry the death penalty. Garrett's calculating expression suggested he was reassessing his position. I want immunity documentation before I say another word. Palmer spoke into the microphone again. Tell him we'll prepare provisional immunity paperwork contingent upon verification of his information. The interrogator relayed this, adding, as a show of good faith, we'd like you to clarify your connection to Operation Tempest and Captain Robert Thornton. Garrett considered this for a long moment, weighing options and consequences with the precision of a man accustomed to strategic thinking. Finally, he spoke. I didn't compromise Tempest directly. That was before my involvement, but I learned about it later from my handlers. It was considered a significant success in their operations against U.S. naval intelligence. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, a cold focus settling over her like the calm before entering combat airspace. Who were your handlers affiliated with? The interrogator asked. A private intelligence firm with connections to several state actors. They operated through cutouts and proxies. I never knew who ultimately received the intelligence I provided. And Captain Thornton? Garrett hesitated. What I know is second-hand. According to my handlers, Thornton's mission was compromised by an asset they had developed within naval communications. The Iranians were expecting him. Was he killed? I don't know with certainty. The initial report indicated his aircraft was hit and went down over water. No ejection was observed. Garrett paused. However, several years later, I heard references to an American pilot being held at a private detention facility in Oman. The description matched Thornton. Sarah's breath caught. Beside her, Donovan tensed. This facility, the interrogator pressed. What do you know about it? Very little. It was supposedly operated by the same private intelligence firm, used to hold high-value detainees outside official channels, prisoners who officially didn't exist. Could you identify its location? Garrett shook his head. I was never given specifics, only that it was somewhere along the Omani coastline, disguised as a private research facility. Is there any indication Thornton is still alive? The last mention I heard was approximately 5 years ago, a passing reference during a communication with my handler, nothing specific about his status. Sarah stared through the glass, her mind racing to process this information. Her father, possibly alive, held prisoner for 17 years in some secret facility. The thought was simultaneously hopeful and horrifying. Palmer turned to Donovan, speaking quietly. We need to verify this independently before we proceed further, if there's even a possibility of an American pilot being held." "Agreed," Donovan replied, "but verification will be difficult without more specifics." "I can help with that," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the emotional storm beneath. "Garrett's reaction when I mentioned my father yesterday suggested personal knowledge. Put me in the room with him." Palmer's expression sharpened. "That's not protocol, Captain." "With respect, Director, standard protocol hasn't identified this facility in 17 years. Garrett knows more than he's saying, and I may be the key to extracting it." Donovan and Palmer exchanged glances, a silent assessment passing between them. "5 minutes," Palmer finally said. "No promises, no threats, just questions about your father. Understood?" "Understood," Sarah replied. 2 minutes later, she entered the interrogation room, noting the momentary shock that registered on Garrett's face before he controlled his expression. "Lieutenant Colonel," she said, taking the seat across from him. Garrett stared at her, calculation evident in his eyes. "Captain Thornton, this is irregular." "So is betraying your country and fellow service members," Sarah replied evenly. "I'm not here about yesterday's operation. I'm here about my father. I've told them what I know." "No," Sarah countered. "You've told them what you think will secure you the best deal, but I need the truth about my father." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Why would I know more than I've stated?" "Because your comment to me yesterday wasn't the statement of someone with second-hand information. He had the same arrogance, the same certainty that he knew better than everyone else. Those are the words of someone who knew him personally." A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps respect, crossed Garrett's face. Perceptive, but it proves nothing. "You're right," Sarah acknowledged. "It doesn't prove anything, but we both know there's more to the story. My father has been held prisoner for 17 years while his country, his family, believed him dead. If there's any chance he's still alive, I need to know everything." Garrett studied her, weighing options against consequences. "What are you offering that your superiors haven't?" "Nothing. But consider this. Whatever deal you make will eventually require verification of your information. If that information leads to the recovery of an American POW after 17 years, the value of your cooperation increases substantially." The pragmatic appeal to self-interest seemed to resonate. Garrett leaned forward slightly. "I met your father once briefly during a joint exercise in 2007. He was impressive, the kind of officer others naturally followed." Garrett paused. "When I heard about his downing during Tempest, it was officially described as mechanical failure. But within certain intelligence circles, there were rumors it had been a successful interdiction operation." "When did you learn the truth?" "In 2011, after I'd been recruited. My handler mentioned it as a significant intelligence victory. The compromise of a top-secret extraction operation, the capture of an American pilot with extensive knowledge of naval operations, and the facility where he was held." Garrett hesitated. "I never saw it personally, but I heard it described as a converted oil research station on the Omani coast, approximately 50 miles south of Muscat. It was operated under the cover of a private environmental research organization called the Arabian Maritime Research Institute." The specificity suggested truth, or a very calculated lie. "Is he still there?" "I don't know," Garrett admitted. "The last reference I heard was in 2020, a casual mention that the American asset was still providing occasional technical analysis." "Technical analysis of what?" "Naval aviation capabilities, aircraft systems, tactical operations." Garrett's expression shifted subtly. Your father was kept alive because of his expertise. As long as he remained useful, they had reason to maintain him. The implication was both hopeful and chilling. Robert Thornton might still be alive, but only because his captors continued to extract value from his knowledge. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sarah asked. Garrett's eyes met hers directly for the first time. "Because whatever I've done, I never intended for American service members to be captured or killed. Intelligence is one thing. Betrayal that leads to deaths is another." The distinction seemed self-serving, a moral line drawn conveniently to exclude his own actions, but Sarah sensed a kernel of truth beneath it. "One more question," she said. "Why did you try to expose Matthew's team yesterday?" Garrett's expression hardened. "I didn't. That operation was legitimate from my perspective. My handler requested specific intelligence about extraction protocols, but I had no knowledge of any planned interception." The claim contradicted the evidence, but before Sarah could press further, the door opened and Palmer stepped in. "That's all for now, Captain," she said firmly. Sarah nodded, rising from her chair. As she turned to leave, Garrett spoke again. "Captain," he said, his voice lower, "if your father is still alive, understand this. The man who returns won't be the man you remember. 17 years in a place like that changes someone fundamentally." The warning, or perhaps caution, hung in the air as Sarah left the room. In the corridor outside, Donovan and Matthews waited with Palmer. "We're already running verification on the Arabian Maritime Research Institute," Palmer said without preamble. "Preliminary data suggests it exists on paper, tax records, research publications, even a website, but very little physical presence beyond a listed headquarters in Muscat." "Classic intelligence cover," Matthews observed. "Enough documentation to withstand casual scrutiny, minimal actual operations." Sarah processed this information with the focused clarity that had defined her career. "If the facility exists, and if my father is still there, what's the next step?" Donovan and Palmer exchanged glances. "Verification first," Palmer said firmly. "We need satellite reconnaissance, signal intelligence, human assets on the ground. No action without concrete confirmation." "And if confirmation comes," Sarah pressed, "then it becomes a complex diplomatic and military question," Donovan replied carefully. "Oman is technically an ally. Any operation on their soil would require either their cooperation or complete deniability." The subtext was clear. Even with confirmation, rescue wasn't guaranteed. Political considerations, international relations, and operational risks would all factor into the decision. "Sir," Sarah said, addressing Donovan directly, "request permission to remain involved in this investigation." "Denied," Palmer interjected before Donovan could respond. "You've provided valuable assistance, Captain, but this is now a matter for intelligence services and special operations." Sarah maintained her professional composure, though internally she rejected this dismissal entirely. "With respect, Director, my presence has already proven valuable in extracting information from Garrett, and my knowledge of naval aviation operations could be crucial in identifying legitimate intelligence about my father's situation." "She has a point," Donovan acknowledged, his expression thoughtful. "Captain Thornton's involvement thus far has yielded results standard interrogation didn't achieve." Palmer considered this, her analytical mind visibly weighing options. "Limited involvement," she finally conceded. "Advisory capacity only, with appropriate compartmentalization of operational details." It wasn't the full access Sarah wanted, but it was a foothold. "Thank you, Director." "Don't thank me yet, Captain," Palmer replied, echoing Donovan's earlier warning. The odds of finding your father alive after 17 years are remote, and even if we do, the complications have only just begun. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah was assigned to a small team analyzing historical satellite imagery of the Omani coastline, searching for facilities matching Garrett's description. Meanwhile, intelligence analysts dug through 17 years of records related to the Arabian Maritime Research Institute, building a profile of the organization's activities and personnel. Matthews led a separate team examining Garrett's communications and movements over the past decade, searching for patterns that might reveal additional contacts or locations. By evening, the combined efforts had yielded preliminary results. A facility matching Garrett's description had been identified approximately 47 miles south of Muscat, a complex of buildings on a rocky peninsula, ostensibly dedicated to marine research, but featuring security measures inconsistent with scientific operations. Heavy perimeter monitoring, regular patrol patterns, reinforced structures, noted the imagery analyst, highlighting features on the satellite photos. Minimal boat traffic despite being designated as a research station. And notably, no publications from this specific facility despite the parent organization claiming it as their primary research center. Palmer nodded, her expression grim. Consistent with a cover operation. What about personnel? Nominal staff of 12 researchers according to their public records, replied an intelligence officer. But regular supply deliveries suggest a larger permanent presence. We've identified at least 20 individuals in security positions based on movement patterns and behavior. Sarah studied the facility layout, her tactical mind automatically identifying approach vectors, defensive positions, and potential extraction routes. The complex was deliberately positioned for isolation, water on 3 sides, a single access road on the 4th, elevated terrain providing clear lines of sight in all directions. It's designed to be defensible, she observed, and to control who comes and goes. Agreed, Matthews said. This isn't research, it's detention. Palmer turned to Donovan. Enough for the next phase. The Admiral nodded. Proceed with signal intelligence and prepare a ground surveillance team. We need eyes inside that compound. Timeline, Sarah asked. 48 hours for initial SIGINT, Palmer replied. Ground team can be in position within 72. After that, it depends on what we find. The measured pace felt agonizingly slow to Sarah. If her father was indeed alive and held in that facility, every hour mattered. 17 years of captivity had already passed. How much longer could he survive? But she understood the necessity for methodical progression. A rushed operation based on insufficient intelligence might not only fail, but could put her father at greater risk if his captors detected the interest in their facility. Captain, Donovan said, breaking into her thoughts. You've been active for nearly 24 hours straight. Get some rest. That's an order. Sarah recognized the wisdom in the command, despite her reluctance to step away from the investigation. Yes, sir. We'll continue analysis through the night, Palmer assured her. If anything significant develops, you'll be notified immediately. Sarah returned to her assigned quarters aboard the carrier, her mind still processing the day's revelations. The possibility that her father might be alive after 17 years was simultaneously hopeful and terrifying. What condition would he be in after such prolonged captivity? Garrett's warning echoed in her thoughts. The man who returns won't be the man you remember. She lay down on the narrow bunk, not expecting sleep to come. But the cumulative fatigue of the past 48 hours, the hurricane rescue, the compromised operation, the revelations about her father, pulled her swiftly into unconsciousness. The dream came vividly. She was flying her F-35 through impossible weather, searching for something vital but undefined. Below, the ocean stretched endlessly, occasionally broken by rocky outcroppings. Her father's voice came through the radio, distorted but recognizable, giving coordinates that kept changing, receding as she approached. "Find me, Sarah. I'm still here, still waiting." Sarah woke suddenly to the sound of urgent knocking. The chronometer showed she'd been asleep for just over 4 hours. "Captain Thornton," came a voice through the door. "Admiral Donovan requests your immediate presence in the intelligence center." Something had happened. 5 minutes later, Sarah entered the intelligence center to find it in a state of controlled urgency. Donovan, Palmer, and Matthews stood clustered around a communications station, their expressions grave. "Captain," Donovan acknowledged her arrival, "we've received new intelligence. The facility in Oman is being evacuated." Sarah's pulse quickened. "They know we're looking." "Appears so," Palmer confirmed. "Satellite imagery shows increased activity starting approximately 2 hours ago. Vehicles loading, personnel moving with purpose. They're clearing out." "How?" Sarah demanded. "How could they know?" "Unknown," Donovan replied. "Perhaps Garrett had a dead man's switch, some signal his handlers monitored that was interrupted by his detention, or there could be another source we haven't identified." The implications were clear. If the facility was being evacuated, any prisoners would be moved or, worse, eliminated. "What's the plan?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Palmer turned to her, expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "That's the complication. Standard protocol would be to continue surveillance, track movements, identify where prisoners are being transferred. But if they're destroying evidence or—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "We need to move now," Sarah stated, not a question but an assessment. "The nearest SEAL team is 6 hours out," Matthews said, frustration evident in his voice. "By then, the facility could be empty." Donovan straightened, decision evident in his bearing. "Director Palmer, prepare all available intelligence for immediate tactical use. Commander Matthews, coordinate with air operations. I'm authorizing an emergency response mission." The room shifted instantly from analysis to action, personnel moving with trained efficiency to implement the Admiral's orders. "Captain Thornton," Donovan turned to Sarah, "your F-35 stealth capabilities and sensor suite make it our best option for immediate surveillance. I need you in the air as soon as possible to monitor evacuation patterns and identify potential HVT movements." "High-value target, her father." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, already calculating flight paths and fuel requirements. "This is reconnaissance only," Donovan emphasized. "Maintain stealth protocols, passive sensor sweeps. We need eyes on that facility without alerting them to our presence." "Understood, sir." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in the cockpit of her F-35, running through abbreviated pre-flight checks as the carrier's crew prepared for an unscheduled launch. The massive ship had altered course to optimize wind conditions for takeoff, its engines driving it through the dark waters of the Arabian Sea. "Viper 01, you are cleared for priority launch," came the flight controller's voice. "Wind 030 at 12 knots, ceiling unlimited." "Copy that, Control. Viper 01 launching." The F-35's powerful engines ignited, pushing Sarah back into her seat as the aircraft accelerated down the carrier's deck. In seconds, she was airborne, banking toward the Omani coast 90 miles distant. "Viper 01, maintain Angels 30 until 30 miles from target, then descend to Angels 1-5 for optimal sensor coverage. Stealth protocols in effect throughout. Copy control. Angels 3-0, descending at 30-mile mark. Sarah pushed the aircraft to maximum sustainable speed, her mind simultaneously processing tactical considerations and the emotional weight of the mission. Somewhere ahead, her father might be alive, a possibility that had seemed impossible just days ago. The Omani coastline appeared on her forward displays, a dark line separating the Arabian Sea from the desert beyond. Sarah began her descent, the F-35's advanced stealth systems ensuring she remained invisible to conventional radar. Viper 01, be advised, satellite shows continued evacuation activity at target site, multiple vehicles departing via the access road. At least 2 helicopter signatures detected. Copy that control. ETA to target 3 minutes. As she approached the facility, Sarah activated the F-35's advanced sensor suite, passively collecting electromagnetic data, thermal signatures, and high-definition imagery without emitting detectable signals. The compound came into view, a collection of buildings nestled on a rocky peninsula, floodlights illuminating a central courtyard where personnel moved with urgent purpose. 3 SUVs were being loaded near the main structure, while a helicopter sat with rotors turning on a pad near the shoreline. Control, Viper 01. I have visual on target facility, confirming evacuation in progress. 3 vehicles being loaded, 1 helicopter prepped for departure. Sarah guided the F-35 in a wide orbit, maintaining distance, while her sensors recorded every detail of the operation below. The thermal imaging revealed approximately 22 individuals moving through the compound, some clearly security personnel with weapons, others appearing to be staff gathering materials. Control, requesting permission to conduct closer surveillance of helicopter and vehicles. Potential HVT transport identified. A moment's pause then, permission granted. Viper 01. Maintain passive systems only. Sarah adjusted her flight path, bringing the F-35 to an altitude of 12,000 feet directly above the compound. From this position, her sensors could capture detailed imagery of vehicle contents and personnel movements. The helicopter drew her attention immediately, 2 security personnel standing beside it with a third figure between them. The thermal signature indicated a person, but with anomalous characteristics: lower body temperature, unusual posture. Control, Viper 01. Possible detainee being moved to helicopter. Thermal signature suggests compromised physical condition. Sarah magnified the image, straining to discern details through the thermal overlay. The figure appeared to be male, thin, with difficulty standing independently. The security personnel supported him on either side, their body language suggesting they were handling someone weakened or injured. Her father. The possibility sent a surge of adrenaline through her system, but Sarah maintained her professional focus, continuing to relay observations. Helicopter appears to be primary transport for high-value personnel. 3 SUVs contain mainly equipment and documentation based on loading patterns. Copy that, Viper 01, came the response. SEAL Team ETA now 4 hours. Continue surveillance and tracking of all departing vehicles. 4 hours, too long if they were moving her father now. The helicopter's rotors increased their rotation rate, preparing for immediate departure. Control, helicopter is spooling up for launch. Request instructions regarding tracking. Maintain observation, Viper 01. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Sarah watched as the helicopter lifted from the pad, banking sharply to the northwest. Away from the coast, toward the Arabian Peninsula. Control, helicopter is heading bearing 310. Speed consistent with light tactical transport. Continuing surveillance. She adjusted her flight path to follow the helicopter while remaining outside detection range. The F-35 stealth systems making her effectively invisible to their presumably civilian-grade radar. The helicopter maintained its course for approximately 22 minutes before altering direction, descending toward what appeared to be a private airfield carved into the desert terrain. A small jet waited on the runway, engines already running. Control, Viper 01. Helicopter is landing at secondary location, private airstrip approximately 70 miles northwest of primary facility. Light jet aircraft present and active on runway. Copy that, Viper 01. Maintain surveillance. Sarah watched as the helicopter touched down near the jet. The same three figures emerged, two security personnel supporting the third between them. They moved quickly toward the waiting aircraft, the weakened figure's gait uneven and labored. Transfer in progress to fixed-wing aircraft. Unknown type, appears to be medium-range business jet. The jet's door closed moments after the figures boarded. Its engines increased power immediately, suggesting a pilot who had been awaiting this specific payload. Aircraft is commencing takeoff roll. Sarah maintained her position, tracking the jet as it accelerated down the runway and lifted into the night sky, banking sharply to the north. Control, aircraft is airborne, heading 005. Speed consistent with light business jet, approximately 350 knots. Viper 01, continue tracking. We're coordinating with regional air assets for potential intercept options. The implication was clear. If the jet contained her father, they couldn't allow it to reach its destination. Once it landed in potentially hostile territory, recovery would become diplomatically and operationally impossible. Sarah followed the jet for 43 minutes as it maintained a northerly course over the Gulf of Oman, gradually ascending to 30,000 feet. Its flight path suggested it was heading toward Iranian airspace, a destination that would put any American prisoner permanently beyond reach. Viper 01, be advised, target aircraft will cross into Iranian airspace in approximately 15 minutes at current speed and heading. No intercept assets available within operational window. The message delivered the worst possible news. Once across that boundary, the jet and whoever it carried would disappear into a nation with whom the United States had no diplomatic relations. Sarah processed this information, tactical training battling with emotional investment. If her father was on that aircraft, this might be the last opportunity to recover him. 17 years of captivity followed by permanent disappearance. Control, Viper 01, requesting permission to execute warning intercept of target aircraft. A long pause followed, longer than communication delays could explain. Finally, negative, Viper 01, authorization for intercept denied, maintain surveillance only. The decision was tactically sound. A warning intercept risked escalation, international incident, and potential failure. But Sarah knew what it meant. They were watching her father slip away again. Control, be advised, Viper 01 is experiencing communication difficulties. Signal breaking up. Will maintain mission parameters. It was a transparent fiction. Her communication systems were functioning perfectly. But it created a small window of plausible deniability for what she was about to do. Sarah pushed the F-35's throttle forward, accelerating to maximum speed as she closed the distance to the business jet. Her aircraft's stealth capabilities would keep her invisible to the jet's civilian radar until she chose to be seen. Viper 01, we are reading your communications clearly. Return to surveillance parameters immediately. She switched off the primary communication channel, maintaining only the emergency frequency. What she was doing constituted direct disobedience of orders, potentially a court-martial offense. But some risks were worth taking. The F-35 closed rapidly on the business jet, its superior speed allowing Sarah to maneuver into position just off the smaller aircraft's port wing. Still in stealth configuration, she was invisible to both radar and visual observation in the night sky. Sarah activated her targeting systems without arming weapons, a configuration that would project a laser designator onto the business jet's fuselage, a clear message that they were being tracked by military hardware. The reaction was immediate. The business jet banked sharply away, its pilot clearly startled by the sudden appearance of a targeting signature. Sarah maintained position, keeping the designator steady on the aircraft's fuselage while activating her navigation lights, revealing her presence visually for the first time. The business jet's pilot responded with a series of evasive maneuvers, but Sarah matched each one effortlessly, demonstrating both the F-35's superior capabilities and her own exceptional piloting skills. The message was unmistakable: you cannot outrun or outmaneuver me. After 30 seconds of futile evasion, the business jet leveled out, its course now parallel to the Iranian border rather than toward it. Sarah maintained position, the targeting designator still fixed on the aircraft's side. The emergency radio crackled to life. Unidentified aircraft, this is a civilian flight operating in international airspace. Your actions constitute an act of aggression. The voice was male, accent suggesting Eastern European origin, tone professional but with an undercurrent of tension. Negative, Tango 724, Sarah replied, using the jet's tail registration number visible in her optical sensors. This is a security verification intercept. Your aircraft departed from an unsanctioned airfield following suspicious personnel transfer. Identify all persons aboard immediately. The fiction of a security verification provided thin cover for what was effectively a military intercept, but it created a narrow diplomatic path forward if complications arose. We are conducting private business transportation. 3 personnel aboard: pilot, co-pilot, and business client. Your interference is unwarranted and illegal. Tango 724, be advised, we have tracked your aircraft from initial boarding. We are aware you are carrying a detention subject transferred from an Arabian Maritime Research Institute facility. That subject is of interest to United States authorities. A longer pause followed, suggesting communication between the pilot and others aboard. This is now a matter of international security, Sarah continued, leveraging the moment of uncertainty. You have 2 options: return to Omani airspace and land at Al Musana Air Base for inspection, or risk being identified as a hostile entity in international airspace. The implied threat was clear without explicitly stating military action. The business jet maintained its course parallel to the Iranian border for several more seconds before banking gently to the south. We will comply with inspection request, came the terse reply, under protest. Understood, Tango 724. Maintain current speed and altitude. Any deviation will be considered hostile intent. Sarah reactivated her primary communication channel. Control, Viper 01. Target aircraft has altered course and agreed to inspection landing at Al Musana. Request immediate coordination with Omani authorities and deployment of security team to airfield. Donovan's voice came through directly, a mixture of frustration and grudging approval evident in his tone. Viper 01, We've been monitoring your communications difficulty. Coordination already in progress. SEAL team diverting to Al-Musana now. Copy that, Control. And Captain, Donovan added, we'll discuss your interpretation of orders after the mission is complete. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, the potential consequences of her actions insignificant compared to what might be at stake. For the next 47 minutes, she escorted the business jet back across Omani airspace toward Al-Musana Air Base, maintaining constant surveillance and the implicit threat of her targeting systems. The jet complied fully, making no further attempts at evasion. As they approached the airfield, Sarah could see activity below, vehicles positioning around the runway, personnel taking security positions. The Omani authorities had responded to the American request with impressive speed. Tango 724, you are cleared to land on runway 08. Follow tower instructions precisely. Understood, came the clipped response. Sarah maintained position as the business jet descended toward the runway, her sensors tracking every aspect of its approach and landing. Only when the aircraft had come to a complete stop, surrounded by Omani security forces, did she break away to establish a surveillance orbit around the airfield. Viper 01, SEAL team arriving in approximately 15 minutes, Donovan informed her. Omani authorities have secured the aircraft and detained all occupants pending our arrival. Any confirmation on identities, sir? Negative. Omanis are maintaining perimeter security only until our team arrives. No approach to aircraft occupants yet. The longest 15 minutes of Sarah's life followed as she circled above, watching the scene unfold. The business jet sat isolated on a remote section of the airfield, Omani security vehicles maintaining a cordon around it. The occupants remained inside, their status unknown. Finally, 2 Black Hawk helicopters appeared from the south, landing near the secured area. SEAL operators deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing a secondary perimeter as Commander Matthews led a smaller team toward the jet. Sarah watched through her sensors as the aircraft door was opened from outside. Matthews entered first, followed by 2 operators. Long moments passed with no visible activity. Viper 01 returned to base, mission complete. Control, request status update on aircraft occupants. Another pause, longer this time, before Donovan replied personally. Captain, we've recovered 3 individuals from the aircraft. 2 appear to be private security contractors. The third. He hesitated, an uncharacteristic break in his professional demeanor. The third has been tentatively identified as Captain Robert Thornton. Condition stable but requiring immediate medical attention. DNA confirmation pending. The words hit Sarah like physical force, momentarily disrupting her focus on flying. After 17 years, the possibility had become reality. Her father was alive. Copy that, sir, she managed, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil beneath. Viper 01 returning to base. As she banked the F-35 toward the carrier, Sarah felt a complex wave of emotions: relief, anxiety, hope, fear. Her father was alive, but in what condition? What had 17 years of captivity done to him? Would he recognize her? Would she recognize the man he had become? Garrett's warning echoed again. The man who returns won't be the man you remember. But he was returning. Against all odds, against 17 years of absence, Robert Storm Thornton was coming home. And whatever challenges lay ahead, medical, psychological, legal, they would face them together. Sarah pointed the F-35's nose toward the distant carrier, flying into the first light of dawn breaking over the Arabian Sea. The mission she had begun as a child at her father's funeral, the promise to discover the truth, had reached its impossible conclusion. He was alive. He was coming home. The phoenix in the storm had found her way back to where it all began. Author's note asterisk. Dear readers, thank you for taking this journey with me through Sarah Thornton's story. When I sat down to write Phoenix in the Storm, I wanted to explore themes that I felt would resonate deeply with those of us who have lived long enough to understand that life rarely follows the script we write for ourselves. Sarah's story is, at its heart, about the promises we make to the people we love and the lengths we'll go to keep them. For 17 years, she carried the weight of not knowing what happened to her father. Many of us have experienced that particular kind of pain, the unanswered questions, the unfinished goodbyes, the what-ifs that haunt us in quiet moments. But this story is also about perseverance in the face of impossible odds. Sarah didn't just survive her father's disappearance. She channeled that grief into purpose. She became exceptional at what she did, not in spite of her loss, but perhaps because of it. I wrote her as someone who refuses to accept that some battles can't be won, that some truths can't be discovered, that some people can't be brought home. As someone who came of age during an era when women were still fighting for their place in many professions, I was particularly drawn to exploring Sarah's experience as a female fighter pilot. The obstacles she faces aren't just technical or physical. They're cultural, institutional, and deeply personal. Yet she never makes her gender the center of her story. She simply does the job, proves herself through action, and earns respect one mission at a time. That quiet determination, that refusal to be defined by others' limitations, that's the kind of strength I wanted to celebrate. The military setting provided the perfect backdrop for exploring ideas about honor, duty, betrayal, and redemption. Garrett's treachery isn't just about one man's moral failure. It's about how trust, once broken, ripples outward, affecting countless lives. And Sarah's decision to disobey orders to intercept that jet. That's the kind of impossible choice that defines character. Do you follow the rules even when doing so means losing everything that matters? Or do you trust your judgment, accept the consequences, and act? I also wanted to write about the power of found family and unexpected alliances. Commander Matthews, Colonel Barrett, Admiral Donovan, these aren't just supporting characters. They're people who recognize excellence when they see it, who are willing to change their minds when presented with evidence, and who ultimately choose to do the right thing even when it's difficult. In a time when our institutions sometimes feel broken, when trust in authority seems at an all-time low, I wanted to remind us that good people still exist within those systems, fighting to make them better. The ending is bittersweet, and that was intentional. Sarah gets her father back, but Garrett's warning lingers. The man who returns won't be the man you remember. Recovery from trauma, from captivity, from any profound loss is never simple. It's not a Hollywood reunion where everything returns to normal. There will be challenges ahead for the Thornton family. There will be difficult conversations, painful revelations, long roads to healing. But they'll face those challenges together. And sometimes, that's the only happy ending that matters. Not that everything is fixed, but that you're no longer facing the darkness alone. I hope Sarah's story reminded you of something important, that it's never too late to find answers, to keep promises, to fight for what matters. That expertise and excellence are earned through dedication and sacrifice. That doing the right thing often requires courage, and courage often requires accepting consequences. And that sometimes, just sometimes, miracles happen, not because we deserve them, but because we refuse to stop believing they were possible. If you've ever made a promise to someone you love, if you've ever faced a situation where the rules didn't account for what was right, if you've ever had to choose between safety and truth, this story was written for you. Thank you for flying with Sarah. Thank you for believing, as I do, that some missions are worth any risk. With gratitude and respect. The author.